a mysterious intruder entered the restaurant. His body was transparent and grotesque as he roamed freely among the crowd, yet, the diners couldn't see the monster standing so close. Only Thomas, a staff member, had a fleeting gaze, as if he wanted to look but didn't dare. He looked like he wanted to see it but was too afraid to. The first time Thomas saw this evil spirit, he couldn't wait to share it with his friends. But the next moment, the evil spirit kills anyone who knows about its existence. Even when it targeted his beautiful girlfriend, Thomas could only scare it off by pretending nothing was wrong. However, this action made the evil spirit suspicious. Though Thomas was terrified inside, he appeared calm on the outside. At that moment, an old man walked into the restaurant, immediately drawing the evil spirit's attention. Not only that, but several other evil spirits followed him, circling the man like sharks smelling blood. Thomas realized something was wrong. These spirits feed on human fear before death. If they appear in groups, it signals an impending disaster for the town. Thomas had been able to see spirits and evil entities since he was a child, a special ability inherited from his mother. Sadly, she was executed as a heretic years ago, and Thomas had learned his lesson. Except for his girlfriend and the town sheriff, Thomas didn't dare tell anyone about his ability. But over the years, restless souls had come to Thomas, asking him to help catch their murderers. Eventually, Thomas no longer feared spirits and even helped the sheriff solve several murder cases. Now that the town was facing a disaster, Thomas wouldn't sit idly by. He was sure this disaster was related to the man before him. To find out more, Thomas quietly followed the man until he reached a mall, where the spirits all vanished into a black hole that appeared out of thin air. Knowing they had temporarily returned to their lair, Thomas didn't hesitate and rode his scooter to track down the man's residence. When the man left, Thomas broke into the house. On the table, the ashtray had 3 different cigarette butts, suggesting the man had accomplices. As Thomas continued his search, a cold wind suddenly blew in. He shivered, seeing countless restless souls carried by the wind back into the house. Though scared, Thomas mustered the courage to push open the door. The place felt like a massive freezer, and all the animals in the cages had turned into ice statues. Seeing a glowing hole in the wall, Thomas couldn't resist reaching in. But the next moment, an invisible force almost pulled him in. Barely escaping, Thomas peered through the crack in the door and saw countless spirits emerging from the black hole. It was clear that more spirits were arriving, sensing an impending disaster, walking through the gates of hell to feast. After the spirits left, Thomas re-entered the room, discovering shocking photos on the wall and stacks of documents in a drawer. Finally, he understood why the spirits surrounded the man. He was an extremist, planning an unprecedented terrorist attack scheduled for the next day. Suddenly, there were noises outside. His accomplices had returned. Thomas planned to escape through the window but didn't expect 2 vicious dogs in the backyard. Their barking alerted the accomplices. Fortunately, Thomas managed to climb onto the roof and narrowly avoided disaster. After returning home, Thomas immediately found the sheriff and told him about the planned terrorist attack for tomorrow. The sheriff recognized the man as Bobby. Over the years, the sheriff had relied on Thomas's abilities to solve many cases, but they were always post-crime. For a preemptive crime without concrete evidence, the police couldn't arrest him, so the sheriff could only send an officer to investigate. Thomas didn't dare call the police. Instead, he decided to find a place to bury the body. As he moved it, he noticed the limbs were stiff, indicating Bobby had been dead for a long time. Only now did Thomas realize the Bobby he saw at the church earlier had been a spirit. No wonder the sheriff hadn't found any evidence. Realizing this, Thomas was even more puzzled. Did Bobby's death mean the disaster wouldn't happen? And who had killed Bobby in the first place? As Thomas pondered these questions, he drove the body to an abandoned prison, a remote place where it wouldn't be discovered for a while. But when he returned to town, he saw the streets swarming with evil spirits, a clear sign that the disaster was still coming and drawing nearer. Thomas rushed to find the only person he trusted, the sheriff, only to discover his house surrounded by police cars. The sheriff had been attacked at home. Thomas hurried to the hospital, where he found Jason standing guard. Jason said the sheriff was lucky and hadn't died. He was currently undergoing surgery. Jason explained that the sheriff had been shot 3 times, but his badge had blocked a fatal bullet. Thomas's face darkened. With the sheriff out of commission, who would save the town, desperate and sleepless, Thomas returned to Bobby's house, hoping to find clues about his accomplices. Suddenly, he heard a noise in the kitchen. Cautiously approaching, Thomas once again encountered Bobby's vengeful spirit. Radiating hostility, Thomas guessed that Bobby's accomplices had killed him, suspecting that he had betrayed them and leaked their plan, which is why they murdered him. Bobby, furious, swung his fist, but Thomas ignored it, knowing that spirits couldn't physically harm the living. But the next moment, the furniture in the house began to move rapidly. Thomas hadn't expected Bobby to attack him with telekinesis. A faint smell of gas filled the air. Realizing the danger, Thomas leapt through the window just as a violent explosion shook the house. On the way back, Thomas suddenly thought about Bobby's body. Perhaps there was still a clue to be found. Returning to the abandoned prison, he checked Bobby's corpse, enduring the stench to examine the wounds. To his shock, Bobby's chest had the same tattoo as Jack's. It was now clear they were accomplices, and Thomas deduced that the letters in the tattoo referred to the Children of Darkness, a cult of extremists worshipping evil spirits. Thomas rushed back to town, knowing the mall, crowded with people, was likely the target of the attack. His heart raced, especially since his girlfriend Anna worked at the mall. Upon arriving at the back door, he saw Jason's police car. Armed with a bat, Thomas entered the security room, only to find all the guards dead. A masked figure suddenly appeared at the door. Thomas quickly dodged and swung the bat, unmasking the figure to reveal it was Jason, who turned out to be part of the criminal gang. It was now clear that Jason's girlfriend had been killed by the dogs because she had discovered their terrorist plot. Picking up Jason's gun, Thomas found only 4 bullets left. The 3 missing bullets matched the number of shots fired at the sheriff. Jason was undoubtedly the shooter. Thomas realized Jason must have been on his way to finish off the sheriff at the hospital, which explained why Jason had pointed his gun at him earlier. Though the truth was clear, another accomplice, Jack, was still at large. Thomas decided to get his girlfriend out of the mall first. But just as they reached the main hall, evil spirits flooded the space, covering the entire mall in the blink of an eye. While Thomas stood frozen, screams rang out from nearby. A robber with a machine gun had started shooting indiscriminately. Tourists desperately tried to flee, but the mall doors had already been locked. Thomas saw the robber targeting his girlfriend's shop. Fueled with rage, he prepared to shoot, but the evil spirits jumped out to stop him. After a brief struggle, Thomas managed to fire the remaining bullets at the robber. The terrorist attack was thwarted, but Thomas wasn't happy. His girlfriend's shop had been torn to shreds by gunfire. Just as Thomas was about to lose hope, Anna stood up from behind the counter, and he breathed a sigh of relief, but then he saw Jason's girlfriend's spirit appear. Panicked and frantic. Was the disaster not over yet? Thomas quickly pulled off the robber's mask, discovering it wasn't Jack but the bald man who had been acting heroically. He had been part of the plot all along. Thomas hurriedly followed Jason's girlfriend's spirit to the underground parking lot, where she disappeared beside a truck. Forcing open the cargo hold, Thomas found it packed with explosives. With less than 3 minutes left on the timer, it turned out the random shooting had been a distraction. Their true goal was to blow up the entire mall. And the evil spirits were the masterminds behind the attack. Possessing Jack to ensure the plan succeeded, Thomas jumped into the truck's cab, driving it at top speed out of the mall. He had to get it out of the town before the bomb exploded. But Jack, now possessed, wasn't about to let him escape. Firing at Thomas from behind, Thomas made a sharp evasive maneuver. With only seconds left on the timer, he leaped out of the cab, leaving Jack and the truck to plunge into a nearby river. The explosion lit up the sky, but fortunately, no one was harmed. Except for Jack, who was dead, and Thomas, who had fallen unconscious. When he woke up, his gentle girlfriend was already waiting by his side. Having successfully stopped the terrorist attack, Thomas became the town's hero and finally began a sweet life with his girlfriend. Thomas cherished every moment of this precious time, until one day, the sheriff visited. It turned out that Anna had died in the mall attack. What Thomas had seen was only her spirit. He had refused to accept the truth. Lost in his self-delusion, Thomas knew it was time to let her go. Though his heart ached with sorrow, he had no choice but to say his final goodbye to his beloved. And that concludes the story of Thomas, the town's strange hero. If you liked this story, please stay tuned for more. See you next time.